The leader of the Wagner mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, tells his fighters to turn back because of the risk of blood being spilled. His forces had been advancing on Moscow. An agreement to de-escalate was reached after negotiations with Belarus's pro-Putin leader. Emergency security measures had been imposed around the Russian capital amid fears the convoy could reach the city. Earlier, Vladimir Putin said Russia was facing a battle for its future, calling the rebellion an armed mutiny.
Armed mercenaries are marching on Moscow tonight as President Putin faces an existential threat to his leadership. The Wagner Group, which he funds, has already seized control of the Russian city of Rostov-on-Don before sending a column reported to contain hundreds of military vehicles north to the capital. Wagner's leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has accused Russian forces of attacking his allied troops in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin has declared treason and imposed travel restrictions on the road to Moscow. World leaders are watching every development closely, as is our correspondent Emma Murphy, who has the latest from Kyiv.
At the military base from where Russia controls its war in Ukraine, the man who poses the greatest threat to Vladimir Putin's 23-year reign. Yevgeny Prigozhin, the owner of the Wagner mercenary army, telling Russian commanders that he is now in control of their base. Not a coup, he insists, but a protest at the way the Russian military have treated his troops in Ukraine.
We are in the Southern Military District headquarters. It's 7:30. Rostov's military sites are under the control of Wagner fighters, including the airbase.
After months of dispute with Moscow's military leaders, Prigozhin claimed he was spurred to act after Russian forces apparently attacked a base where his fighters were in Ukraine. With Wagner units on Russian streets, the president addressed the nation, warning of civil war and punishment for the leaders of the armed mutiny.
This is a blow to Russia, to our people, and our actions to protect the fatherland from such a threat will be tough. All those who deliberately embarked on the path of betrayal, who prepared an armed rebellion, will suffer inevitable punishment, will answer both to the law and to our people.
His words did nothing to stop the Wagner push. Convoys heading straight for the Russian capital. Their intentions on arrival still unclear. What is clear is the early impact of this uprising. Amid claims of an explosion at a military base, people ran through the streets of Rostov. The state broadcaster capturing the scene. Footage from the railway station appears to show civilians trying to flee the city. As a Russian helicopter flew above, an explosion hit a fuel depot in the city of Voronezh, likely an attempt to stop the advancing army from refueling en route to the capital. A missile narrowly misses the helicopter. Russian TV stations appeared to be as wrong-footed as the president by the day's events, constantly running commercials, unable to confirm what was unfolding in the country. The Wagner forces moved from their bases in eastern Ukraine yesterday, crossing the border into Russia to Rostov-on-Don. The military column of hundreds of vehicles then headed north via Voronezh, en route for Moscow. In a bid to block the convoy, roads are now being dug up along the route to halt their progress. With reports martial law may be implemented, helicopters are patrolling the skies above Moscow. These are uncertain, dangerous hours. Emma Murphy, ITV News, Kyiv.
Well, the man behind the mutiny used to be one of President Putin's closest confidants. But in recent months, Yevgeny Prigozhin has become one of the most vocal critics of Russia's tactics in Ukraine. Today, he questioned the motive behind the war altogether. So who are his Wagner mercenaries and what is it that they want? Martha Fairley explains.
Ruthless, brutal, ambitious. Yevgeny Prigozhin's Wagner mercenary group is credited with some of Russia's most significant victories in Ukraine, including the long and bloody battle for Bakhmut. But for years he denied being connected to the shady organisation. Prigozhin served 10 years in prison before starting a hot dog stand, but rapidly gained influence, serving presidents at state dinners and winning military catering contracts, gaining him the nickname Putin's chef. Last September, Prigozhin finally admitted founding the Wagner Group around 2014 in support of pro-Russian separatists in Donbass. It's promoted Russian interests in Syria, Libya and sub-Saharan Africa, where it's accused of committing human rights abuses, including sexual violence, torture and executions. Since the war in Ukraine, its numbers have swelled to around 50,000, 80% of whom are drawn from Russian prisons.
The Ministry of Defense in Russia has been supplying Wagner with ammunition and weapons, and Wagner has been working side by side with the Russian army and actually has had very good relations with the Russian army.
But Prigozhin's social media outbursts have been increasingly critical of Russia's Ministry of Defense, angry at a lack of ammunition, blaming it for the deaths of his mercenaries. Now that friction has become something much more serious as he and his forces move on Moscow. Martha Fairley, ITV News.